things are not what they seem, but that's a very disturbing idea. Let's just believe that they are what they seem. This is the functional presentation of ignorance in our daily life, that we become attached to particular kinds of narratives. It's what we're given in our childhood through our parents and going to school. We learn how to elaborate particular kinds of interpretation. We learn not only to make commentaries on direct experience, but we can make commentaries on indirect experience, and we can make commentaries on indirect experience of indirect experience of indirect experience. So at school, you might have to write an essay on King Lear. So to do that, you read some commentaries on King Lear. Then you look up some critique of the commentary on King Lear. Building castles in the air. And yet, someone reads it and they say, oh, that's good. I think you're really starting to understand what's going on here. So the more ideas I have, the more I see. Buddhism goes in the other direction. The fewer ideas you have, the more you're likely to taste directly what is going on. The function of meditation is to release our addiction to ideas as being the vehicle of truth. So, the topic for this evening is emptiness as a basis for liberation. And emptiness is an idea which we find in all the levels and dimensions of Buddhism, in all the different schools. It gets packaged slightly differently, but the basic principle is the same. It's essentially the fundamental basis of understanding the confusion of grasping at the world and finding things to hold on to. So two things operate: a tendency from the one side to grasp, and the fantasy on the other side that there is something that you can get hold of. And this is the basic movement of dualism or duality. And our real issue this evening is to think about what is somethingness. Because as long as the mind commences its operation on the basis of the seeming givenness of stuff, what we have is the elaboration of interpretations of stuff. And because we are very good at beguiling ourselves with our own creativity refracted through the reification, the substantialization, which gives the felt sense that something is there existing in itself, there's always more to say. Always, about everything. There's no end to it. And various schools of Buddhism have debated around this. When we see phenomena as existing as something in themselves, for example, beside me there is a table. On the table there is a cup and a watch. We look around the room, we see people. When you see somebody's face, it seems self-evident that somebody is there. That we look out on a world which is preformed. It's there before we encounter it. And so we are, as it were, running in our lives after the fact of existence. We are secondary to the world. And this leads us into the very common form of mental functioning, which is to be commentarial. We make commentaries about the world. We generate meaning in the world through the kind of narrative that we can generate about the world. And this narrative becomes a kind of thread. We take the entities of the world as if they were loose beads, and we string them onto the thread of our narrative and make the necklaces of meaning with which we adorn ourselves. These basic building blocks are put together, then you can start to manifest your narrative. You can start to make a story. And it appears that each of these vowels and consonants is a something. So, conceptual elaboration, prapancha in Sanskrit, is a very powerful force. It's the way in which one thing leads to another, that we want to say more. And the reason we do that is because of the very nature of language. Each word has no meaning in itself. Meanings move within the semiotic web of interaction and linking. And so it would be impossible to find one word that would simply define it and there you would be. So in our yearning for simplicity, we say that the signifier and the signified exist in a very simple correlation. So if there is a cup, the cup is something which is signified through the use of the idea of cup. I say it's a cup, and when you look at it, you say, yeah, James knows what a cup is. He is able to accurately identify what he's holding in his hand. This is not a frog or a dog, it's a cup. That makes sense. That's how we tend to proceed. But of course, someone else might say, well, it's not really a cup, it's a mug. So now we get into some finer distinctions, and it's a particular kind of mug. And it's also, should you so wish, quite a dangerous weapon. You could hit someone very hard on the head with it. You could break the edge of it and gouge out their eyes. You could use it to bail out a boat. You could use it as a listening trumpet to help your fading hearing. There are many, many functions which are embedded in the object, but which are hidden from us by our desire to know precisely what it is. So, in order to give myself the sense that I know what is what, I have to exclude the potential of the object, because objects always slip away. We tend to believe that we know who other people are. Everybody is multiple. We are plural. We have many aspects of our personality. We have many moods. We have many potentials. And these are revealed according to the circumstances in which we meet people. So we can only know certain aspects of people. And yet we feel we want to know who they are. We want to be able to say, oh, I know what they're like. That desire to apprehend an object which seems to be something apprehendable because it exists in and of itself, as a mug, as a person, as a man, a woman, whatever. This is the basis of the ego's sense of competence and confidence. To be able to move our way through the world, applying the right identificatory categories so that we gain some purchase on what is going on. Because just as this mug has a handle, and that's the normal way in which one would be holding it, all the objects in the world have a handle, because we grasp them. We grasp them with a handle that we affix to them. So in Dzogchen texts, I talk a lot about the naked state of the mind. Naked means no clothing, no handles. The mind is compared to a round bowl. A bowl has no edges or corners. There's nothing to grasp and hold on to. And yet in our everyday existence, the ease of our being in the world with others is entirely facilitated by our capacity to find the handle and then use it correctly. This is a mental activity. But it's a mental activity which is self-deceiving, because it only really works if you imagine that the handle that you grasp belongs to the object. Which means my power as an ego requires me to live in a dead world. So that when the Buddha says all things are impermanent, he's indicating they are dynamic, they are moving, they are changing. You know, as the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus is famous for saying, you can never step in the same river twice. Very simple thing to say, but it's profound, because if you go to the River Thames and you go every day, if you're way upriver and you go for a swim, you can say, every day I swim in the Thames. But every day when you plunge into the Thames, it is different water. Different water, but the same name. That is to say, the phenomenal actuality of what you're encountering is fresh and new, but you reassure yourself about what you're doing by adhering to the name, I am swimming in the River Thames. The stability is not in the water. The stability is in your capacity to convince yourself that your concepts are giving you an accurate account of what is there. So, what is named is not the thing itself. It's not the actual phenomena. Words slip away. Identifications slip away. Identities slip away. There is an immediate actuality, but what is it? This is one flavor of the meaning of emptiness. That the reason that any object, any person can sustain multiple usages, multiple definitions, multiple identities is because there is a fundamental emptiness of defining substance, or what you might call essence. In having no essence, there is the space of possibility. You will never get to the bottom of yourself, because the self is an unfolding process and it's fed by the very action of talking about it. Just as the world is fed by and elaborated through the ways in which we think and talk about it. So the addition of interpretation onto what is there elaborates our ordinary sense of how the world is. Something about which something can be said. So what is that process of the felt sense of the something? How is it that when the Buddha says everything is impermanent and everything is compounded, and we also have a sense of our own history, that we were once small children, we went to school, we've gone through lots of changes, and through these changes we've developed all sorts of personality characteristics, memories, tendencies, and so on. Although we know all of this about ourselves, there still seems to be a core sense that we exist as something. I am myself. So this is quite strong, this is quite powerful. In the face of all the evidence of change, of the fact that we have moods, we have feelings, we have hopes and fears, which arise in interaction with the world. That is to say, I move out towards the world and the world moves towards me. I breathe out, I breathe in. There is clearly no sealant around us. We may feel that we are an individual, that we are an isolated monad, that we are entire unto ourselves, and yet the very physical facticity of our being is that we look out and light comes into our eyes. We hear, we speak, we drink. Our body is in a ceaseless conversation with the world. And the feelings that we have, the interplay of our hopes and fears, arise in relationship. And yet, here I am. I'm me. You're you. Weird. The creative potential of the mind moves in its usual vehicle of language. So we are ceaselessly creating many aspects of the world which we encounter, and yet it becomes easier to deny ourselves in the central role of our own existence and move ourselves off to the margin as small people who are at the mercy of many factors in the big world. There's all this stuff out there, and I don't quite know what it is, and I don't quite know who I am, but there's some big people somewhere who know what's what. But I don't. Do you? This is the fear of the ego, a fear that the ego gives to itself by frightening itself, by imagining that the world is knowledge. Knowledge produced through conceptualization. Knowing shapes. It means it is knowledge of apprehendables. So the senses, the five senses, what you're grasping at is your own projective fantasy. There is nothing. But this nothing is very rich. It is the glimmering, shimmering radiance of the mind, which is never exhausted. It has infinite potential. But how would you live with that? You wouldn't know where you were. You get up in the morning, you have to, oh, what will I do? The space in front of me is wide open and fresh. Oh, got to go to work, got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. So necessity becomes an organization which hides from us the mind as the movement of our creative potential. We look at the development of the idea of dependent coorigination or interdependence, that each form comes into being in dialogue, in relationship, in interaction. Who we are, clearly, when we think about it, has been influenced by our parents, the time that we were born, that is to say the mood of the times, the culture of the times, our gender, our state of health, and so on. And our state of health is, of course, strongly influenced by the kind of medicines that were available when we needed them, whether these were provided by a hospital system or not. So, in the movement of the trajectory of our becoming ourselves, who I am now, many, many factors have been involved. Now, we can tell about these factors as my history. And in that we somehow incorporate them as supportive actors on the stage of my divine self. I want to thank all those who have helped me be the person I am today. But they're not outside, they're inside. All kind of stuff running through us because we don't have a clear boundary. The skin keeps some things out and some things in. It's not very nice to have a hernia, but most of the time we want air to be coming in and air to be going out. We are interactive, and all phenomena are interactive. Even the mug is interactive. It appears to be self-existing. It appears to be something which is here just by itself. Well, that's if you take my hands for granted. If I remove my hands, we have a mess on the floor. So, what will I do with a mug? I better put it somewhere. Every something is somewhere. You can't take the somewhere out of something. This is very, very simple, very direct, but it's very deep. The context and the object, or the context and the entity, are inseparable. When we start perceiving self-existing entities, the essence that we perceive in the entity is an essence projected by the mind. It is the mind which stabilizes or attempts to stabilize that which is unstable, and in fact that which can't be stable. So this is generally what is called samsara. It is the effort to freeze the world, to turn the flow of experience, which is interactive and beyond prediction, beyond appropriation, to turn it into something which can be made reliable, made predictable. Now we're going to have a decision. Should we stay in Europe or go out of Europe? If we go out of Europe, where will we go? We will go somewhere. If we stay in Europe, we will be somewhere. In neither case are we likely to like where we are, because nowhere is the right place. Dissatisfaction is part of our existence because the placing of things somewhere is very hard to do precisely. Why? Because of the commentarial movement of our mind. We enter into judgment. We have imagination. We can imagine the world to be other than it is, and therefore we condemn ourselves to endless activity trying to make this form into that form. If only I had that form, I would feel better. That form is better than this form. But when you work to get from this form to that form, you find there's something wrong with it too. And so life goes on, and then you come to your death. This is what samsara is, the endless adjustments of forms. If you think of what's happened to British education in the last 30 years, or the universities, or the hospital system, is endless tinkering, endless changing, social work departments, the legal service, how funding is made for the courts, the role of the police in society. Endless change. Where is the essence of any of that? Because people bring their minds and think, we can make it better. Things have to change. The river is flowing. You don't actually have to push the river. It will change anyway. The reason people want change is because they've convinced themselves that there is stability. But the stability exists only in their own mind. But instead of looking at their own mind and thinking, well, I could just change my thoughts about it, and the object's going to change anyway, I'll change the object. And then my mind will feel some relief, because I don't like how the object is at the moment. This is quite a confusion that goes on. So politicians can get a lot of media time out of flogging something which is already occurring. So when we look at our own mind in meditation, we see thoughts, feelings, sensations, experiences are ceaselessly arising. There's nothing to grasp hold of. It's there for a moment. It has an impact so that the current topology or the contouring of our experience is reshaping itself as if you had 20 people moving under a big silk sheet. It's bobbing up and down according to the movement, but there is no stasis in that. If bad thoughts come, you might get terrified and retreat from them. You might feel you need to change them and push them away. Whatever you try, they'll go. You might have good thoughts. You might want to hang on to them and build on them and develop them, but they vanish. All mental phenomena are impermanent. All outer phenomena are impermanent. The illusion of permanence is generated by the reliance on abstractions which form a second-order discourse, a kind of miasma, a fog through which it appears that when we are thinking about things, we're actually somehow getting a handle on the thing. But thoughts grasp thoughts, and thoughts are always dissolving. Thoughts are innately, intrinsically empty, but they're very good. They generate the illusion of being reliable and that there's something there. And then they're gone. So it's like going to the movies or the theatre. You're taken into a narrative that seems to be going somewhere, and it endures for a short period of time, and then it's gone. Then it's over. Think, what was that all about? We believed in the movie. We got taken in by the characters. Some meaning, some value seemed to be there. And then it's gone. And you might tell someone, oh, it's quite a good movie, you should go and see it. What would they get? Well, they got what you got. Sand pouring through their fingers. Now, on a nice hot day, sitting on the beach somewhere in the Mediterranean, soft sand, it's warm, picking it up and letting it dribble through your fingers could be quite pleasant. But if you realize that the whole of your life is dribbling through your fingers, that's another matter. But what's it all about? What was it for? It wasn't for anything. It's meaningless. Why on earth would I be interested in a Buddhist view that says everything's meaningless? What's the point of meaninglessness? The point is, it's because everything is meaningless that it can be meaningful. If the objects of the world were intrinsically meaningful, then the capacity of our mind to develop them would be very restricted. It's because the objects of the world exist as potential that they can be endlessly filled with meaning. Meaning comes from the mind, not from the object formation. So this is the central point. It is the empty mind moving in the empty world where the clarity of the mind, the energy of the mind, reveals the ceaseless potential of the unfolding. The unfolding of what? Whatever you want to call it. It's up to you. So in the Dzogchen tradition, they say there is one ground, basic ground of the Dharma Dhatu, the open, empty nature of the space within which all possible forms arise. If you recognize the empty ground, then you see that everything which arises is like a rainbow. Now, you can say a word, rainbow, and you have some idea of what it means, because we've all seen a rainbow in the sky. Nobody has managed to catch a rainbow, or touch it, or put it in their pocket. We experience a rainbow. In fact, we're often touched and moved by seeing a rainbow. You're out in the country and this incredible light fills the sky, the aurora borealis. You see this incredible thing, go, wow, something is happening, but you can't catch it. And this is, in the tradition, used as a way of describing all our experience. That what we have is the fullness, the richness of the revelation of momentary experience, which never becomes an appropriatable entity. What we appropriate is the sloughed off skin of the moment. Just as a snake sloughs off its dead skin, when we grasp something, life itself has slithered away. Life is always moving. And so one good way to become bored and sad and uncertain about ourselves is to devote the years of our life to the accumulation of snakeskins. What do we then do with this wish to appropriate? No, we have to look. Who is the appropriator? I am. In order for me to be me, to continue being the one who I know I am, certain factors around me have to remain the same. Because if there's too much change, I don't like it. I become anxious. I don't know what's going to happen. This is an experience we all have. In that way, we start to see how we're actually off balance and we're using what we take to be object formations to prop us up. So the objects that we are attached to, our possessions, music, friends, and so on, become like a series of flying buttresses that are holding up the shaky wall of our notion of who we are. We don't want to fall apart. Well, who would fall apart? When you observe yourself in the morning and you have a sense of the content of your experience, and certain sensations in the body, certain feeling tones, certain thoughts, This is the current inventory of yourself. By the time you get to the afternoon and you take the inventory once again, the sensations are different, the feelings are different, the thoughts are different. You have vanished. Morning self has gone. Afternoon self has arrived. Effectively, you have fallen apart. And it wasn't so painful. Because it's a seamless move. It's a ceaseless unfolding in which the dissolving of one moment gives rise to the arising of the next moment. Emptiness is not a hellish void. It's not a chasm of despair and existential lostness. Emptiness is the plenum void, the full void which ceaselessly shows its rich potential. The aspect of the mind which is empty and full at the same time. It's empty because you will never find it as a substance or as an entity, and yet it's always full of the unfolding of experience, which is its own shining liquid surface. That liquid surface, when it's attended to, is what's called the Sambogakaya, which means the aspect of enjoyment. Enjoyment means the richness of the world is vital. It's infinite potential. And then within that you have the Nirmanakaya. And Nirmanakaya is the aspect of momentary arising. The root of the term is nirmita, which is like a spark from the fire. It's not continuous, it is situational. And if you observe your own direct experience, when you're walking down the street, there is moment and moment and moment. Each of these moments is what it is. Of course, you can take the thread of narrative and you can grasp the moment and mold it into an appropriatable form and string it onto the narrative of your account of the day. Oh, it was lovely this evening. The sunset was lovely. I walked down the streets. I hadn't been here before. Blah, 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 blah. Lots was going on. Only a very little is relevant. Why is it relevant? Because it looks quite nice and it's got a hole in it. And if it's got a hole in it, I put the thread in it. That is to say, I can say something about it. There's lots of things you see when you walk down the street. You can't catch them. They're gone. We ignore all of that. Because if we attended to that, we become speechless. What is the stage on which our life is unfolding? In the tradition, this is described as the Dharma Dhatu. Dharma Dhatu, you could say, is the space of all dharmas, or the space of all experience. It's an infinite hospitality and an infinite source. It's both the source, because there is no other base or ground out of which anything appears, but it's also the hospitality in that it's spacious enough that everybody gets exactly the right room. All experiences are just as they are. So the emptiness of the space of phenomena allows the endless showing or unfolding of the richness of phenomena. So in the traditional example, it's often used, we have a mirror and we have reflections. The reflections are in the mirror. You can't take a reflection out of a mirror. It's impossible. The reflection is in the mirror. The reflection is the mirror, yet it's not the mirror. Without a mirror, you wouldn't have reflections. When you look in the mirror, you see reflections. You don't see the mirror. The mirror is the infinite, invisible host which generously shows itself in the form of its inhabitation. We go for the reflection, the outer presentation, the image as being the thing itself. But without the mirror, you wouldn't have the reflection. Without the emptiness of the mind, how would we have ceaseless experience? Because experience, to show itself, needs an experiencer. But when we look in meditation to find the experiencer, we don't find anything. This is the great mystery of our existence, that emptiness shows itself through its own clarity without any need to divide into a subject on one side and an object on the other. But even when that division of subject and object occurs, it occurs within the mirror, and so is an illusion. There is the clarity that from the very beginning there has never been a true division. There isn't a subject on the one side, an object on the other. There isn't an inside on the one side and an object, external arena on the other. These are how experience shows itself. Experience arises all at once. So for example, there's quite a nice mirror on the wall there. The mirror shows the rich diversity of contents in the room. According to how you're placed in the room shows itself as a particular aspect. What we see in the mirror at the moment doesn't exhaust the potential of the mirror to keep showing itself. When we look in the reflection in the mirror, we see diversity. We can have discernment as to the particular details of what is arising. And with that discernment, we can apply all kinds of interpretive terms to create the sense that, oh, there are 3 men sitting in a row and then 2 women sitting there and da-da-da, and some people are wearing green and some people are wearing dark blue and so on. We can build up all sorts of interpretive pictures which are seemingly both layered on top of the reflection but also being massaged into it. And the more you approach the reflection with your interpretation, you can directly experience self-delusion. You can talk yourself into there being somebody in the mirror. Most people do it in the morning. They're cleaning their teeth and think, God, I look like shit today. Oh my goodness. So, I'm in the mirror. No, you're not. You're out there cleaning your teeth. If you took the toothbrush and rubbed it up and down on the mirror, it wouldn't really help. It would just be another household chore to clean it. Wouldn't get you anywhere. So, the thought is in the mind. The thought doesn't give you purchase to the actuality in terms of appropriation, but it does in terms of appreciation. So the aesthetic experience of the richness of what can be seen in the variegated display of different colours and shapes in the mirror is the richness of the mind. That would be the traditional symbol of the richness of the mind. Everything is there as it is, and yet it's equal in being empty. It has no real differentiation. It's devoid of substance. It has the capacity to allow the mind to move through all these images and construct many different pictures and forms. And these are all directly embedded in the nature of the mind. When we say everything is empty, it doesn't mean that it goes into a homogenizing machine, and that if everything has one taste, it's somehow flattened out. One taste and differentiated taste are inseparable. They're not two different things. So while we see diversity of color, shape, taste on the point of contact of the senses, we feel internal responses of enthusiasm and eagerness or shyness and moving away. This rich pulsatory movement is nothing at all. All of this is happening, and yet nothing is happening. This is the great mystery of emptiness. Everything which you encounter has no substance to it. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. When we say form is emptiness, whatever you've been holding on to, you won't find anything there. And yet this emptiness is also form. There is no contradiction. There aren't two categories of emptiness and fullness. The mirror is such an important symbol in all of these teachings, exactly because the emptiness of the mirror and the fullness of the mirror are not in contradiction and are inseparable, and yet are not precisely the same. It is, from one point of view, it is as if they are the same, and from another point of view, it is as if they are very different.